Good evening, everyone, and welcome this evening to the Construction Cashflow Show. And I've got a really exciting guest with me this evening, Richard Stone. He's an entrepreneur, mentor, coach, and he runs Stone Contracts, which is a block management firm as well, amongst other interests. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Richard. Good evening, Richard.
Evening, Stuart. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And it's really nice to have you on this evening. And
Thank you
so
for your
for the,
time.
Fantastic. So for the purpose of the listeners, do you want to give us a little bit about your background, what you're up to, what you're doing at the moment?
Cool. So my background, I did some management training when I was at John Lang's when I just briefly left school. I worked on the tools for quite a while before being offered a job as a sort of trainee site manager. Did that and worked my way up to being contracts director. Worked for a couple of different companies doing that sort of stuff, but primarily delivering not just block management contracts, but I've done all sorts of stuff. Worked on the nuclear bunker, supermarket construction, NHS fit outs, school work. I've always loved the kind of like major works projects in the block management sector. So when it came to setting up my own contracting business last year, that's what I chose to do. I chose to sort of focus on solely delivering that kind of work. Because it's what I know, it's what I love, it's what I've got a good, really good, strong sort of supply chain to deliver. And I kind of wanted to sort of focus on my strengths and just concentrate on delivering one single work stream. So that's what we've been doing. We've just finished year one, which has gone really well, and we've got some really good opportunities for year two. And I've got a really, really solid, strong team around me of like-minded people that want to sort of take and move things forward. So yeah, in a really, really good place. That was until coronavirus landed, of course.
Coronas, yes. So maybe we'll come on to that in a bit. And I think it's
Yeah.
fantastic the amount of experience you've got there. What would you say is one of the key ingredients to a successful construction project or a successful maintenance project?
Communication, absolutely, undoubtedly, is communication, and whatever form that takes. If you can't get on with the people that you're working with and effectively communicate the project deliverables and what it is that everybody around the table wants to deliver and what the outcome needs to be for the client, you're never going to succeed. And that doesn't matter whether you're fixing a tap washer in someone's property on a reactive maintenance contract, not that we do RM, or whether you're doing like a major works project like putting a new roof on or doing some external repairs and decks. It's about communication and getting on with people and, getting on with each other for the greater good of the project. You're not always going to agree with everybody that's around the table, but it's about everybody being honest about what they're there for, and working together as a team to deliver that sort of stuff. And I think some of the issues that are coming out now, in all manner of different ways, are as a result of poor communication. I mean, if you look at, and I don't want to get into really forensic detail about it because obviously it's a live case, but if you look at the helicopter view of some of the stuff that's coming out of the Grenfell inquiry, that's about communication. I thought they were doing it, they thought it wasn't my responsibility. That's poor communication.
Absolutely, yeah. I find from my own profession through quantity surveying, we find that communication is a key thing. And one of the things, setting up a project and tendering a project, pre-planning the communication is another thing, because sometimes I find it doesn't always come naturally. You've almost got to talk about how you're going to communicate with each other beforehand to give everybody a voice in the project. And I think one of the things that I find is bringing people on board in terms of communication really, really early, even before you go out to tender to get the advice and input, particularly of construction expertise. And one of the things we fall down on a lot from a quantity surveying perspective is we might prepare bills of quantities, but what we sometimes don't get is the sequencing of the works, because I find that a rate against a metre square is only a rate in terms of the context of the sequence. So if the sequence is out, that rate changes. So, what's your view on that in terms of the way that you see that projects are set up and the timing at which you come in to start communication?
I think that the earlier you can engage with people, the better. And I'm an absolutely massive advocate for that. I mean, it's one of the things that we try and do with people. And you've been following me on LinkedIn for a while, so you'll have seen some of the sort of the footage we put up of jobs and stuff. one of the things that we offer to our clients is to actually go out when they're very, very first kind of contemplating work, and actually film the block and have a chat with them and get an understanding of what it is they want to achieve. What are they trying to fix? Because the sooner that you can get that early engagement, the better chance you've got of getting the right outcome successfully delivered the first time. I mean, it's becoming increasingly common in big sort of, I mean, I did some work in sort of the reactive maintenance environment, which was all competitively tendered for like public sector bodies, government departments, local authorities, and they were putting out like PIN notices, prior information notices, and they were trying to get early engagement meetings, which were good. We went to some really, really positive ones where they wanted to try and get input from the contractor about actually what does a good set of information look like on which for you to base your bid. You know, don't just send us some pivot tables and without the backup data, because if you haven't got the backup data, you can't possibly make any kind of assessment of how accurate that information is. So it's great having a set of accurate bills. I mean, most of our jobs we don't get them, if I'm honest, because normally most of the tenders we price it, we will always say this isn't measured in accordance with SMM7. If the quantities of irony are only indicative, you need to check yourself. But the quantities only tell half the story, as you quite rightly say. It's about the program and the sequencing.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have an item that says there's a 400 square meters of tiling, and you price that as a rate of doing 400 square meters. But that doesn't tell you that you're going to be doing that in micro small windows, a square meter at a time. Which
Absolutely.
Is very animal. So you'd apply a wholly different rate to that, and that's why I think you kind of need to have that bill of quantities, but also you either need to have a program outlined, or you certainly need to be contemplating what the program is going to look like at bid stage, because if you don't do that, you're just on a hide into nothing. It's a really dangerous place to be going down, just pricing blindly, putting rates against the schedule of, it's almost a schedule of rates.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that, Richard. And I would always advise a client to get someone like yourself involved early to give logistics advice, you know, and sequencing advice. Particularly, you know, I like to look at a bill of quantities as a system, really.
Yeah.
But it's only a system when it's got the input of someone like yourself who's aware and knows how those quantities are sequenced and in the logistics of a project. And I think that makes all the difference. I think it brings a lot of clarity. Something else I think you're doing, which is really, really good, is we quite often will go out with a pre-qualification questionnaire. But I've noticed with yourself, you put a lot of information and content out on social media. So it's almost like we're getting to know you and your business early on, really. So you're almost kind of pre-qualifying, because it makes it feel like, oh yeah, we know Richard Stone, we know his business, he puts a lot of content out. And that kind of helps clients get to know you and to trust you and like you, you know, whereas I think the old fashioned way of PQQs is kind of a little bit of a paper exercise, paper trail exercise. And so, you know, since you've been putting content out on social media, Richard, how have you found that? Have you found what sort of positive feedback have you been getting from that?
That's a really interesting subject, Stuart, actually. And I would agree with some of that. Actually, and I've sat in bid meetings and I've had big inputs into putting massive tenders together. And you sit there and you fill in these blooming great PQQs with a load of PAS 91 questions. And actually, they don't actually get to the heart and the mind of the business. And that's borne out by the fact that I've sat in interviews with clients and they're like, well, we really like how you're working and we like the service you're providing, but actually we've got all these other people that we don't want to work with, but they've actually passed the PQQ stage. So
yeah, absolutely. Tell me about it.
They don't really sort of serve the purpose. To answer your question, the idea for me doing video content was one that came out of one of the mastermind groups that I'm really fortunate enough to be part of, and it was a bit of a personal challenge for me to do it, because it's not something that I was naturally comfortable with, and it was about pushing me to get out of my comfort zone, which my comfort zone a long distant memory. I've had a real mixture. I've had a real mixture of feedback. It's partly done so that clients get to know us and who we are, how we work and what we stand for. It's partly to share information and to give value to people. And it's also, it kind of works in a 180-degree way as well, Stuart, because what it does is that people know who I am and what the business is like and how and what we work and how what we stand for. And if they've seen that and they comment and they want to work with us, it's almost like a pre-qualification in itself that actually they must share some of the similar values and attitudes that I have and that we have.
Absolutely, yeah.
It kind of works in both directions.
Yes, it does. And I can remember the amount of times I've been sitting around a table with the design team and the client, and we're doing the old-fashioned PQQ assessment. And exactly right what you say, Richard, is that we've gone, that one gets the high score, but that we don't want to work with him. We know the one that's going to do the job is, better place to do the job. We want that one, but it's not coming out on the score. But what you're doing, and I've been following your work and your content online, and it helps me to get to know you. I think, yeah, that's what, I understand your values, the way you work, what you're working on, and almost pre-qualifying the type of clients you're working with. And that's so much better. I could almost now give a client, say, look, there's this firm, Stone Contractors, contracts Richard Stone. Look, here's his LinkedIn profile. Go and have a look at that and see what you think.
Do you know the really funny thing is that quite a few years ago now, I was contracts director at TH Kenyon, and we used to do an awful lot of block management work, and we had I wouldn't say slick. We had a good team of people and a proven system for connecting with new clients, but it was a very, very old school, not draconian, but kind of a bit almost like Victorian kind of approach to getting new clients. And I went and did a pitch to a surveyor's practice in central London, had a really good chat, really good meeting with them. And then for the next 3 years, we didn't get a single job of business out of it, but they were all really positive. And I went to a networking event probably 3 months ago now in central London, and I was stood there just chatting to two guys, and I heard a noise in the background, and it was a guy had walked into the room, and it was a guy that I'd been trying to contact, and I'd been to pitch to at his office at this time, and he walked straight across the room and was like, I love your content, I feel like I already know you. So I think part of it is actually that people get to know you far better through your content, which is real and honest and brutal, than they ever are going to through death by PowerPoint.
Absolutely. And I think it just shows you the change in times. I think it's really important for people to put content out on social media. I think people probably downplay it. It's not for business, or it's this, it's that, it's the other. But it's really important that people get to know you, isn't it? And that you start to get comfortable with it.
At the end of the day, Stuart, people buy from people.
Yeah.
And I only want to work with people that I've got common values with, and I've got a real depth of connection. And if I haven't got that, and that's why, I've put a couple of posts out this week saying, do you know what, a couple of things have changed. We are actively looking to take on a couple of new clients. So do you know what? Let's jump on a call and have a video chat. If we think there's some synergy and there's some connection, brilliant. If there's not, we'll send you some sweets. Knock yourself out. But if there's no connection there either way, then it's never going to work. Some of my best clients, I'll go to a site meeting, we'll spend 10 minutes talking about what's actually relevant to the project, agree evaluation, and the next hour is about sort of like common interest to do with like charitable stuff and mentoring like the next generation of people that are coming on board, and stuff about what they're doing to sort of automate their back office and what they're doing with IT and what apps we're working on. We'll talk about all manner of other stuff other than actually the project, because that's really easy. We know what we're doing. They're employing us to do a professional job. Everybody's happy with what's being done. So let's actually talk about other stuff. Then that can drive some real value, not just for their business or for mine, but actually in terms of like charitable stuff and community stuff, to actually sort of make an investment into the next generation. Because if we don't do that, then we're all going to be in a world of trouble. Just to come back to the one point you mentioned earlier about getting on, looking at things with logistics and stuff. Logistics is equally as important, I think, as that bill of quantities and that program, because if you haven't got an accurate understanding of how you're physically going to get your components onto site, you're screwed if you're working anywhere within the M25, because logistics is where it's at, and people do not comprehend the level of detail that needs to go into that. I mean, there's loads of people. I had a meeting with considerate constructors this week because we've applied to, rather than just sort of tickle around the edges and just register a couple of jobs when the client demands it, we're actually registering the business, which means that they come and audit our processes, procedures, how we actually deliver, and they hold us accountable to do that, and then they verify that on site. And I had a really interesting chat with the guy who came out to do our audit, and we were talking about fours and clocks and doing construction logistic plans. And he said to me, well, you seem quite knowledgeable about it. And I said, well, I know enough. I know what I need to for my. And he said, well, if you've only ever done this kind of work, how would you know that? And I said, well, I haven't only ever done this sort of work. I've done all sorts of other stuff. I said, and I'll give an example. I was involved in sorting out a claim on a project in central London where it was a vertical extension, and the client was quite a demanding developer, but a friendly enough bunch of guys. And they'd asked this contractor to give them some advice on how they were going to do this timber frame vertical extension. And the contractor's advice was that they didn't need any kind of provision for parking to be sort of taken out of service for a crane, because they didn't need a crane, but they were going to put 300 ton of timber panels 7 stories in the air without a crane.
Yeah.
And it was like, what? They just couldn't comprehend this, and they went into contract with this contractor. And it's so true that you need to do the due diligence. When I did a presentation at the NEC last year for the National Housing Conference, for their annual conference, me and 4 others did, or 3 others actually, did a presentation for an hour, and then a round table event, which I'll share with you separately because I think you'd get some value out of it. And it was about choosing the right contractor, because just saying, well, okay, well, we'll go with like a big national blue chip contractor because they can do all of the services. That's great, they might be able to, but is that really the best solution? Are you getting the people with the relevant experience from that work stream? Because if you're commissioning a £25 million hotel, or a hospital, or a reactive maintenance contract, or an external repairs and decks contract, I cannot be convinced that one contractor in the UK could deliver all of those work streams effectively.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that, Richard. And one of the drawbacks, particularly if it's a public sector project, is the client quite often looks at the size of the business, but the size of the business doesn't always reflect the expertise of that business. And that's why I've been looking into ways in which we can cash flow projects differently, i.e. by linking the supply chain, the contractors, with the funding source. It might be the funding.
Makes perfect sense to me, because I've actually suffered last year that exact thing. I was sent a tender to Price, and they sent it to me, and they said, we've checked your CRN number, so your company registration number. We know you're a new contractor, but we also know, because one of our directors has worked with you in the past, and they really liked how you delivered the job. And it was quite funny, because the ironic thing was that the job that we delivered, we came second for a national award on. We didn't win the award, but they asked me to tender for this job, so I tendered it, and it was a really nice piece of work. It was a reasonable sized job. It was about 220,000, I think, and we tendered it, and they came back and said, you are lowest by a little bit, not a lot, which was it's always kind of my thing. I'm not hanging out the bottom, because it's never a nice place to be. So I was comfortable from that point of view. And then 2 weeks later, they said, yeah, thank you, but we're not going to use you because you've only been trading for 4 months.
It's ridiculous.
I rang the lady up, and she said, I can't really talk. She said, but what we said in our letter is what we stand by. You've only been trading, where's your bank facility? Where's this? And I was like, okay, well, why don't you tell me what it is you need, and I'll look to provide that for you. And she said, well, it's too late. She said, you've not been trading for 2 years, so we can't work with you. Yeah. And I was initially a bit frustrated, but actually, in hindsight, I can probably see their point. And that was one of the things that, when I listened to your podcast about the funding solution that you're looking to try and get some traction with, I think the more of that sort of stuff that can be done and rolled out, the better, because that gives small contractors that kind of opportunity to scale and grow a lot quicker, which is obviously good from a contractor's point of view. But I've seen all manner of stuff, as I'm sure you have in my career, and I've seen I was MD of a company, and through no fault of that business's own, when the banking sector decided that they fell out of love with construction within the space of about 4 hours, we literally we got a payment certificate in from a client for, or we actually got the cash in off the back of a payment certificate for just over 200 grand. The business had a facility of 500,000 at the time, and the bank just dropped that facility by 300 grand within an hour. And clawed the money back. And it was like, how, this is just ridiculous. But then conversely, I've also seen where I've done some change management stuff with some businesses a number of years ago now, and they used to literally, they would get a payment in off of a project, and it would be sucked up in somebody going off and making some like ostentatious purchase of a new vehicle, or funding some other kind of lifestyle purchase, and the money was never ever stayed. And I think your term is keeping the cash within the project, rather than it getting sucked into like operational cash flow or other stuff that actually the business has got commitments or people within it choose to spend it on. So I think from the client's perspective, it can only be a massive win, and I can't see why a client would not want to go down that road, because for them it de-risks construction massively.
Oh, absolutely, Richard. And why would a client want to miss out on the expertise? Someone like yourself, for example, has got years and years of experience in logistics and sequencing work, and you can't account for that experience. It's worth its weight in gold. And they might go for a large national contractor who might then outsource to a site manager or something like that. You don't really know how much experience they've got. So the selection process is kind of ask about face, really. We need to provide a way of helping to bring in expertise, reduce risk, and as you say, if we can keep the cash in the project, and we all know that cash farming goes on at a high level.
Certainly does.
Money is used to bankroll large corporations, operation costs, or more so, as you alluded to, they make short-term investments with the money, hoping that they can liquidate that cash back into the project. But once they've got several projects on the go, that is very difficult, and we can see that from the Carillion experience and many others since, that this is the very issue that is causing the problem. So if we can find ways and means of taking the cash risk, the cash management, cash flow risk out of a project, we can start to really concentrate on bringing in the right expertise.
Yeah, massively. I think, and at the end of the day, Stuart, projects are delivered by people, not by businesses. And if it makes it easier for clients to choose who the right project management solution is, and when I say project management, I refer to the whole team, not just the project manager. Because I'm conscious that there's probably about 20 different roles that have an input at least in a construction management project. It's not just about the project manager, but if you can actually get the right people on board to deliver your outcome that you're looking for, whatever that outcome might be, then that's far more likely to be successful. And if you can actually, and yeah, I mean, cash farming is a massive issue, but it doesn't have to even be cash farming necessarily. It's quite often money comes into businesses, and I've seen it in contractors. They'll get paid on one job and they'll get £500,000 in on one job, and the subcontract bit run for payments is due out the next week. So actually, that money that hits their business current account funds that subcontractor payment run, but half those subcontractor payments have been accrued liabilities across about 20 projects. So the money doesn't stay within the project.
Absolutely.
So if you could use that as a way to keep the money within the project, then probably the other thing that you could do is, because it is less risky, then you could also look at ways of actually doing away with retentions.
Oh, absolutely, massively. Yeah, I don't see any reason. That's a big subject on its own right, retentions, isn't it?
Huge subject.
And we keep saying it will get phased out. It's really clients have got to drive it, and main contractors have got to drive it. I've even seen circumstances where a main contractor's working for a local council. I won't name the local council, but it is an actual situation that happened. The local council issued a contract to a large contractor on the basis that the local council wouldn't charge retention, and it was a condition precedent that the main contractor didn't charge its subbies retention. However, in reality, the council wasn't charging retention, but the main contractor was charging its supply chain retention, and the local council turned a blind eye to it.
Yeah, happens all the time. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that main contractors do, and I'm not going to name any names for obvious reasons, but there's people that are doing that exact thing. There's people that are charging, that are moving retention off and using it to do stuff on the stock market. There's people that are still levying 1.5% on their supply chain and calling it a prompt payment discount. Actually, it's just funding their CRTB levy contribution.
Absolutely, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
there's all manner of stuff that goes on, and I think, you know, I think having these like project bank accounts and these kind of arrangements where it gives the client and the contract administrator the ability to actually see where the cash sits within the contract can be a good thing. The only thing that I would add to that is that I think then you need to look at the fees that the professional team are actually being paid, because, you know, there's probably a whole separate piece of work for somebody to sit down and commit a couple of hours to actually looking at where the cash sits in a job and then actually apply some thinking to that. Well, if you're on a tight fee because you had to tender those fees yourself and it's a very competitive market, then is the time allowed within that fee structure for you to actually do that?
Yeah, not normally, particularly if you've got to, if you're tendering for a fee. I mean, the way that I'm trying to approach it at the moment, I do see there's a need there, and so that's why I'm setting up a part of my business, which is construction cash flow consultancy, whereby we can talk to a client and say, look, these are the benefits, these are the this is the amount of money you can save by installing a system that is going to transparently track your cash in your system, you know, and it's the risk it takes away. So I'd like to think we could apply our fee in accordance with the risk, the risk that it reduces for the client, b the pace at which it speeds up the cash flow, therefore speeding up the project. And also I'm thinking that the faster the cash flows, the quicker they get a return on investment. So I'd like to be able to say, look, you know, this is the service, this is what we can achieve. You know, it reduces the risk for you and your lender, and our fee is a percentage of that, you know, as opposed to and choosing clients that are on board with this, because I know when I tender fees for a project, quite often there won't be any margin in it, you know, so it's not really a fair exchange, you know. We're giving advice and experience but not getting that fair exchange in return. So I suppose my aim is to offer something to clients that meets their need, meets you know, their need in terms of their investment, and also making it a fair exchange as well.
Yeah, it needs to be a fair exchange. I think that's a really valid point. It needs to be a fair exchange, because at the end of the day, it's, if you can give the client a better value, then it's got to be about the value. It's not the cost.
Absolutely.
So if what you're saying to him is that if you go down this road, you can competitively tender this to some nice big blue chip surveying practices, and yeah, you'll get a really stonking deal. But actually, what value are you getting out of that? Are you just going to get somebody that's just going to rock up and do a payment certificate once a month, do a set of meeting minutes, rattle through it, and then you won't see them again? Or actually, you're going to get somebody that's going to take some responsibility and take some ownership and be accountable for actually not just ticking the boxes of the role, but actually getting into the nuts and bolts of it, and actually sort of peeling back a few layers and saying, well, okay, well, why is the labour count down? Oh, okay. Well, where's the money sitting on the? Oh, well, what, the groundwork hasn't been paid? Well, it's funny that, isn't it? Where's all their labour gone?
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's interesting, Richard, that I can actually see the health of a project where, in terms of where the cash is flowing and when payments are made, even without looking at the project. If the cash isn't flowing the way that it's planned, I know there's an issue. And it's very kind of novel way of looking at it. But because now I can see the cash in the whole of the supply chain, I can say, right, okay, it's not flowing where it should flow, then there's a problem. So I can get straight on the phone and say, you know, what's the issue with this package? What's the issue with that package? Is there any, you know, what are your, or it may be it could be at any level within the supply chain. I can just pick up the phone, you know, is there a problem? We can get it sorted out, which sometimes you can't necessarily pick up on traditional routes, traditional procurement, traditional contracts, and the traditional way things are done.
On a traditional contract, you wouldn't have that visibility. You've got no idea. Once the payment certificate's issued from the developer to the main contractor, you don't know what the main contractor's done with that money. Nobody does.
No, absolutely.
And in all honesty, Stuart, probably not even the main contractor.
No, as we've seen, yeah, have we seen with all
Which
the
is why they
insolvencies?
seem to keep sort of
Absolutely.
hurtling towards the wall and just sort of going from fifth to
Yeah,
sixth gear and sort of making the journey a bit faster.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, no.
So
So Richard, I wanted to move on to something while we're on a subject that I know you're very keen on, and it's a subject uh, uh, that I'm interested in as well, and that's around the area of how we pass on our knowledge to the younger generation and mentoring and even for ourselves. You know, you and I have been in the business for many years, got lots of experience, and I know that you're keen on your own self development, etc. So what would be your, you know, what's your take on how we kind of pass on our expertise and knowledge, and how we develop ourselves, and how important that is to have mentors and to actually mentor people?
I think it's fundamental. It's, you know, I mean, I was never, I mean, I've the word CPD has been banged around since before time, and I think it's never been more important than it is now. I think, I mean, for me, it's I love doing the mentoring stuff that I do, and it's something that I've done for a long time. And it was really funny because I actually got sent a very nice bottle of aftershave just before Christmas from a guy that I mentored 4 years ago,
Yeah.
and he'd just been promoted to commercial manager. And when he first started working with me a number of years ago, he joined as a trainee QS,
All
and
right. Yeah.
he sent me this lovely, and I won't go into details, but it was a really lovely handwritten letter,
Oh, nice.
and I cried
Oh, that's
because
amazing.
the fact that it wasn't the gift, because
Mm,
aftershave, but it was the fact that he'd taken the time to write this really lovely, articulately put, hand inked letter. And it was like, do you know what? Fair play to him. He's absolutely smashed it. And I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, and he's actually just passed his driving test as well. So,
amazing.
and that was a big thing for him. I love it. I love spending time with people. If they've got a passion to learn, I can match that threefold with life energy in terms of spending time with people and actually helping and coaching and teaching them. And then at the other end of the spectrum, um, personal self development is something that is really hugely important to me. I mean, I consume content like it's going out of fashion. It was quite funny because I was talking to somebody yesterday and they asked me how many, but what's my preferred method? And I said, well, I don't really have one. I said I like to talk to people quite a lot on LinkedIn, but I love it when people don't agree, because that just, it's like taking a sledgehammer to the glass that is effectively an echo chamber.
Mm,
Because if you
yeah.
don't get people that challenge you and don't get people that make you think differently or see things through a different set of eyes, then you just sort of bouncing around in a little echo chamber on your own. So that's one of the reasons I like social media so much, because it's great for that. But I mean,
Mm.
I've either read, listened to, or read on my Kindle over 35 books since Christmas. Um, Pretty
Wow,
much,
that's
I mean,
amazing.
all sorts of stuff. I mean, The Pumpkin Plan by Mike Malchevich, Live It, Love It, Sell It by Jules White. A big favourite of mine was Donald Miller, about building a story brand. That was a great book.
Oh yeah, yeah, I read that.
Um,
Fantastic
Ye
book.
Myth,
Yeah,
Daniel
yeah,
Priestley stuff about KPIs, which KPI took on a whole new meaning for me. Because previously I'd got the sort of the industry accepted one about it being about performance measurement. Ryan Holiday stuff. I've tried looking at a couple of, there's a couple that have fallen by the wayside that were a bit sort of deep, on stoicism and stuff. Pig Wrestling, somebody recommended to me. That's a really good book about problem solving and working out actually where problems exist.
yeah.
All manner of stuff. I can't read enough. I love it. And if I might only get 5 or 10 things out of each book, but you know what? If I get some value out of it, it's good. I
Yeah,
love my mastermind groups that I'm in. I get so much value out of that. Some of the one-to-one coaching that I'm fortunate enough to be able to go out and get is great. And it, you know, all sorts of stuff. And I think the reason I said, I mean, at the top of the question, I said I don't think it's ever been more important. And the reason for me giving you that as like a helicopter view answer is because the world is changing by the day and by the week.
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
took my wife back to hospital a few weeks ago to see a surgeon for some surgery that she's got planned, and it was the same surgeon who sewed my arm back on when I tore my bicep off quite spectacularly 3 years ago, and so he's not a family acquaintance, but he almost is, because he actually did my mum's carpal tunnel surgery as well, so he's kind of on our Christmas card list. And I was chatting to him while he was waiting for some scans to come through on the NHS network. And he was saying that his children are fortunate enough to go to private school, and he'd been to a careers evening there recently. And there was like an alumni guy there who was, I think he was in his late 20s, talking to this cohort of sort of 14, 15-year-old lads and girls. And he said, the thing you guys need to remember is that I've got a really close network of friends, and there's 5 of us in my friendship circle. He said, I'm a doctor. He said, my other 4 friends earn twice what I do. Their jobs didn't even exist when we sat down with a careers advisor.
Yeah,
well, if they didn't exist and people didn't bother to invest in their continued professional development, how would you ever keep abreast of actually where the world is going?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's more important now than ever to
Massively.
invest in yourself. I think in the old days when I was growing up, it's investing in property or shares, and those things are still really important. But I didn't appreciate when I was younger around investing in myself, and it's something that's really only come to me in recent years. And it's interesting. I did an exercise a few weeks back, and I looked at my life in every decade, and I realised that I'd kind of reinvented myself once every 10 years, in a way. And that's because the world was changing. But in those days, I didn't have really many people to guide me. But this time round, I've got some really good mentors around me. People that are there's always people that you can teach, and there's always people that you can learn from, isn't there? And I know finding Progressive, for example, I've got some really good mentors around me there and some masterminds, and you learn off of other people that are on the same journey, don't you? And
yeah,
I'm
hugely.
finding that's so important. Yeah.
I think you can learn off of people that are on the same journey as you, and it's really useful to actually learn from people that are on the same journey, but in a different industry as well, and to share experience. And from people from cross sector and from totally different industries. I mean, I do some stuff with Progressive as well. I get a lot of value out of that. I'm in a mentoring group over in Ireland, which has got, I think there's 12, 14 of us in that. I get huge value out of that, and the sort of the kind of the communication channels that we've got set up within that are really effective, not just for like the quarterly meetings, but even like daily stuff. And bouncing ideas around, and I mean, the world of technology moves at such a fast pace that is almost a CPD sort of subject in its own right. That irrespective of what industry you're in, we all share the same challenges. We all want to be able to work quicker, faster, more efficiently, using the same amount of time that we've got. And actually, we're all pretty much, anybody that's in those kinds of groups is pretty much an entrepreneur and kind of struggling with work-life balance because they're really, really uber-driven and desperately want to succeed, and they have to try and balance that with their home life. So they're sort of trying to sort of juggle those kinds of things as well as trying to sort of learn and do as much development as they can. So I don't think it's ever been more important to try and learn stuff. I mean, we're talking now using an app that probably didn't exist a year ago.
Absolutely, yeah. We wouldn't have been doing this, and probably not having this conversation around investing in ourselves, mentoring, and entrepreneurship, and all these things, and the rate of technology. And I'm sure we'll all be starting to use blockchain tokens and all that sort of thing before we even know it.
Yeah, I had quite an interest. There was a guy in my mentoring group at Progressive who's massively into sort of blockchain currency and stuff. It's not something I know a tremendous amount about. It's certainly something I want to learn about, but it's probably further down my list than other sort of more not contract specific or certainly role specific, but more I'm sort of looking at more stuff to do with automation this year, and working smarter. So we've done a load of stuff with our accounts now. That's set up and working. That's hugely automated, and then we're looking at moving that kind of backwards. So from right through our customer journey, so looking at how we can use tech to manage our operational delivery. How we can use
Sorry.
that to kind of, that goes right the way through. So it's about having that kind of golden thread right through from tracking the first conversation I had with somebody on either face to face or on a site or at a meeting, either or social media, and then like literally from there all the way through the getting the tender documents prepared, doing the site inspection, putting the bid together, checking what the qualifications are, all of the supply chain discussions that go on throughout the tender period, formulating the bid, submitting the bid, all of the interview stuff, all of that, all through one channel. And I think I'm up to about 450 different boxes on the process map of that at the moment. That sounds really glamorous, but they're actually just post-it notes on my living room floor.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's really fantastic how you're thinking about that, and you're thinking about customer journey, and you're streets ahead of a lot of other contractors, particularly from my perspective of quantity surveyor, and we procure contractual work. You know, to hear you say that is music to my ears. So tell us more about Stone Contracts and how it's doing, where you're going with it, more about the customer journey that you provide and the work that you do.
So the types of work we do, we've got 3 principal work streams. We've got work stream 1, which is external repairs and decorations, which is on not all mansion blocks, but larger blocks of flats and apartments. So stuff that's got 8 or more units in generally. So external repairs and decks, so it's roof repairs, chimney stack repairs, joinery repairs, rainwater goods, surveying. It's about essentially like cyclical maintenance, so that when we leave a building and hand it back at practical completion to the independent contract administrator, they know that they're not likely to get any sort of short of sort of a storm, any kind of sort of day-to-day issues, because we've had a really good range over the building. And not only that, but actually it looks a million times better than when we've appeared. I mean, we've got this thing about curing house embarrassment, and for me, that's about actually, you know, when people buy a house, unless they're buying a wreck or a flat, people fall in love with a property. That's what makes them want to buy it. Over time, properties get tired, people don't, maintenance isn't done. So when we come along and do our package of works, it's about restoring people's love for that property, which is essentially their biggest asset typically.
Yeah.
So that's the external repairs kind. We also do common parts refurbishment programs on blocks. So it might be something as simple as just literally a bit of compliance testing, check the fire doors, check the fire alarm, check the AOVs and stuff, and then decorate and clean the carpets. It could be at the other end of the scale where it's asbestos lift shaft removals, new lifts, new ceilings, new smoke alarms, new electrics, small power and lighting, emergency lighting, carpentry, finishes, ceilings, and it's literally one end of the spectrum to the other. Those types of jobs range from sort of 5,000 right up to $500,000. And then the other stuff that we do, which I've done for probably, I mean, I can remember doing one sort of almost 20 years ago now, passive fire work, which was some fire doors, service penetrations, making sure that the building was left in a safe manner and that all the fire compartmentation had the integrity that it was designed to have. And we do quite a lot of that sort of work, and we're literally just about to start one in a block in North London where I did a job 3 years ago, and they've actually invited me to go back and do a load more work there, which is always nice. It's always nice to be invited back to work on the same block with the same client, because it kind of underwrites the service that actually we provide and the value that we give to clients. And you know, I mean, probably 90% of our business is repeat business. So to get that recurring work, and that's not to say it's always on the same blocks, but it's with the same people. And for me, that's what it's about. It's about those people. So we've kind of got the 3 work streams. I would like to see each of them grow, and the intention is that each of them grow. We've just recruited a contracts manager a few weeks back, completely out of sector, because I want him to come on board and actually not come with the, well, I've always done it this way, because there's a lot of people out there that do it, and people do everybody's got their own take on how things are going to be done. So we're making a massive investment in his training, his development. We've just literally drawn out a big, huge infographic with his training plan on for the next 1, 2, and 4 years. And I think there's something like 40 events in that, which is really exciting. I'm really, really keen to do do some of the stuff with that, because that's legacy building stuff. That's helping
Oh,
somebody to
amazing.
actually sort of leverage their own personal capability and actually push their own boundaries of what they can achieve. And
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons I set the business up, to create opportunity for other people. So
yeah.
that's
That
kind of
sounds amazing. Yeah,
that's where I want
yeah,
to sort of move forward with it, really. And what I'd like to do over time is actually get him more involved, and then build a team of people, take on some additional site management. Maybe look, I mean, my QSing, I do most of it myself because I'm a numbers man anyway. But maybe look at bolting on some people and bringing people on board that can do that in the future, and build a slightly bigger team. I mean, I'm really fortunate. I've got a really solid team of people. Our accountancy people are just absolutely out of this world. We've got an amazing social media champion. The safety guy that does my safety and my quality and stuff, I went to college with him when I was on the tools 25 years ago at night school, and he does my safety. And the fact that, you know, we go back a quarter of a century, I love that, because we can just, like, the banter and the crack is just awesome, and that's part of what I love about the industry.
yeah.
And it's quite funny because the guy from Considerate Constructors commented on, like, the fact that we knew what each other were thinking when we were sitting talking about the business the other day. And, you know, that's why I love what I do. It's about the people.
Oh, absolutely. That's fantastic. So, Richard, if any of our listeners listening this evening wanted to get in touch with you, they had any needs around their block management and all the things that you've described, how can they get in touch with you?
So as we stand today, they can either email me. My email address is on our website. My calendar is also on our website. If they want to book a call, completely no obligation call, just go to the website at stonecontracts.com, and there's a link there to book a calendar. I'm in the middle of writing my book, which will be out this year. So if they want to send me an email with the word book in the subject line, they can reserve a copy of my book. And we are probably about 4 weeks away from launching our podcast, which is going to be called On the Block. So they can just drop me a message with the word podcasting, and I will send them a link to the first show, so that they can get some content that way.
Wow, that sounds really exciting, the book. So I'm really excited for that to come out, because I'll be one of the first to read that, Richard. Fantastic. And to benefit from your experience of life and business and construction and management. So I'll be really interested in that. And so
it will definitely be an interesting ride for the reader. I'll give you that.
Absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, Richard, and I'm sure everyone's enjoyed it. And so please do come on the podcast again. I'm sure there's lots of other things we can talk about. And when
Definitely.
the book comes out, perhaps you can come back on the podcast and we'll talk about your book.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Richard.
No worries.
Cheers, everyone. Bye
Cheers,
now.
Stuart. Have a good evening.
And you. This has been the Construction Cashflow Show, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye for now.